Hey folks, Fernando, and this is just released Transparency International Corruption Percentage Index. How corrupt is your country? How good is your life expected to be in a few years from now, given how corrupt your country is or not? What kind of corruption do you have in other countries? And does all of this even matter? Is this just bullshit? Is this real? How is this even considered? All of that in this video. Before I go on, I did use the Transparency International Index in bugging out and relocating and a bunch of other things. So if you want to learn more about this kind of stuff, especially if you're considering relocating, especially if you want to have at least the way I analyze these things and the way I perceive these things, bugging out and relocating is for you. Also, since we're talking about my books, 3 survival skills, the practical stuff of preparedness and everyday survival, and surviving the economic collapse, given everything going on with the economy in the world, you want to get these books in the links there below. I'll also leave the link of transparencyinternational.org for you to go check out yourself and read more about it. Now, like everything else, you have to take these things in context. First question, where is this even coming from? Who the hell is Transparency International? Well, Transparency International is a German registered association founded in 1993 by former employees of the World Bank. Okay, so we're talking about quality, transparent, non-corrupt people, right? Yeah, anyway, strongly linked to UNESCO, United Nations, so it's kind of like this globalist thing, right, with that globalist UN agenda. Oh, then I'm not even looking into it. No, let's not rush things. Let's give this a chance, see if it makes sense, and where it doesn't make so much sense. And objectively, with a level-head mind, let's analyze these things and use what we can, take all of this, and talk a little bit more, okay? Shall we? Least corrupt country in the world. Number 1, Denmark. Okay, fine. Finland, New Zealand, Norway, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland, Netherlands, Germany, Ireland. These would be Luxembourg. These would be the top 10 least corrupt country in the world. Do you have a problem with this? Let me know in the comments section below. I'll tell you what I think. I think that, yeah, there's something here that does make sense. Some of the least corrupt countries in the world, some of these Nordic countries which have some of the best standards of living, some of the best, quality of life in general, little corruption, usually quite safe. And I would kind of agree with this. I think that it does make sense that some of these countries are in fact have very little corruption, and it does translate into something that is important for us. If you're living here, kudos, good for you. Live in Sweden, great, fantastic. Now, is Singapore really ranking number 5? Well, allow me to call bullshit a little bit on that, mostly because of a cultural difference, mostly because of what is probably legal in Singapore is probably not so legal in most of the rest of the civilized Western world. If you look at the way in which some of the workers are treated, they're treated quite bad. And I'm not only talking about migrant workers, people that come from other countries. They basically work in conditions of slavery, which would be appalled. It would be, a scandal in the United States or Europe if you treat people like that, especially workers from abroad. But even for the people themselves in the country, they have a very, let's call it, very Asian authoritarian way of doing things. But why the hell is it that Singapore ranks so high in spite of this? Well, I'll make a very safe assumption, which is there's an interest here. Singapore is the financial center of Asia. It's one of the places where pretty much all main banks around the world, they have a strong presence in Singapore. Singapore is somewhat of the sweetheart of the elite, especially in the financial world. So they always want to prop Singapore. Would I like to live in Singapore? Hell no. It's a country where the kind of rights that I would have are very limited. The kinds of right you would have are very limited if you're used to any kind of Western world freedom that we often take for granted. So yeah, allow me to disagree. Now, may that be the case that in paper, according to their own laws, they're not that corrupt? Well, yeah, that may well be the case. There is a strong case for, that's not illegal here, so this is not corruption. Now, this is not just Singapore. This applies to the United States as well. The United States is actually ranking nicely here. 24 out of 180, that is a very little corruption in terms of the United States. I will call bullshit on that as well, because many of the things that are perfectly legal in the United States are not legal in many of these other countries around the world. What you guys call lobbying, that lands you in jail in many other countries. I would say in most other countries. What is this? Well, it's pretty simple. If a politician takes money from a corporation and then returns a favor for that money received, that's, in most places, that's very much illegal. There's laws specifically saying that you cannot do that. You cannot take a single buck. While in the United States, a politician gets $10 million from different firms, and then, yeah, you pass laws benefiting those firms. Yeah, you can't do that in most other countries of some of the similar developed nation status. But in the United States, it's called lobbying, and it's perfectly legal. And I would go even further in terms of corruption, like what? Like corruption in the police, corruption in the force, right? How corrupt is that compared to Argentina? Well, I'm from Argentina. I know Argentina very well. I know the United States quite well as well. I lived in the United States for a while. I traveled to the United States fairly often, and I know a lot of people that are, cops, military from the United States, and most, people that I know in general are either military, cops, former military guys and that sort of thing from the different countries that I know. People, that is like 70% of the people I know and associate with are either cops locally or in other places, and so on. I have a pretty good idea of how that goes, and in general, most people that I know that are cops, active duty or former military, are fantastic people. That does not mean that it's the case for everyone, because that's the case for most of the guys that I know from Argentina that are cops. Now, at the same time, I know for a fact that there's a very strong chance that if I get stopped in Argentina by a cop, and Argentina is ranking 94 out of 180, so that's pretty bad. If I get stopped in Argentina by a cop and I give him a few bucks, he'll probably just let me go. Oh, speeding ticket? Okay, here you go. Okay, be careful, don't go so fast. You could, it's kind of dangerous. Okay, go. It's cultural. It's corruption. Yes. Is it something that happens very often? Yes, it does happen very often. Will it happen with all officers? Of course not. You may get a guy that says, no. Hey, listen, you're speeding. This is the ticket. Here you go. You may get someone that is very offended. You probably won't get arrested for trying to give money to a cop in Argentina, even if he doesn't take it. It's something that he probably will not escalate something worse. But there's a strong chance that he will take that money. That is not as likely to happen in the United States, right? If I try to get out of a speeding ticket by handing over $100 to your average cop in the United States, that's probably not likely to happen. It could, probably not so likely. Now, I'm a lot more likely to get beaten up and killed by 6 cops in the United States than in Argentina. That's simply the way it is. The idea that you have not one bad apple, not 2, not 3, nor 4, nor 5, but 6 bad apples put together. All of these bad apples with cameras, knowing that the fucking camera is filming, and they still torture and beat a guy to death. That is very much moral corruption in the way that the guy in Argentina that took my money so as to avoid giving me a speeding ticket, that guy will probably not participate in that. The same guy that is corrupt by taking money from me for a speeding ticket or for not having whatever registration in my car or whatever, right? I don't have my license with me or whatnot. That guy will probably just find it repelling, the idea of, yeah, I'm beating a person to death. So there's different levels of corruption. There's a moral corruption at a point in which why is that? Because of a level of violence generalized in society, institutionalized violence from the government towards the people itself of its own country and the rest of the world. Is there maybe something regarding that? May well could be. I will argue that this idea of 24 out of 180, yeah, it's a matter of opinion. And I keep scrolling down. I go to Ireland, Luxembourg. Luxembourg is a small little nation state, which I have no doubt is super safe, beautiful place, very high income, very high standards of living. It is also the place where you have some of the more nefarious, some of the more evil, some of the most corrupt globalist corporations in the planet operating from. So objectively, it's like the capital of some of the worst corruption in the planet being in Luxembourg. And yet it ranks super low in, corruption perception index. Why? Because it's the kind of corruption that the people that do the corruption percentage index themselves specialize on. Okay, that's why. Same for if I go to Switzerland, super safe country, no corruption, 7 out of 180. Yeah, well, that's where some of the shadiest, crappiest, most evil money is invested on. Am I likely to bribe a cop in Switzerland? No. Am I likely to get beaten to death by a cop in Switzerland? I will say most definitely no. I would say that is very unlikely for that to happen. Corruption level, moral corruption from the force, institutionalized violence in that way, disregard for the people that they're supposed to protect and serve. I would say that is very unlikely to happen. Now, on the higher ranking, is it something that is happening? Hell yes. These are the places, some of these nice, pretty places are some of the places where some of the most evil elite operates from. And, same with this. I'm looking at it right. France 21, UK 18, really? That's nice. Well, you have people like our friend Bastard Dave, a cop raping women in UK for 20 years. If you're called Bastard Dave among your peers, probably someone should look into those claims by women that say this guy have been raping them. It's not just one guy, because just one guy is not a statistic fact. It's just, it could well be an exception. This is recurrent. This is very often that you see cops in UK abusing, raping, even murdering people. And it's something that is, it's quite visible because it's pretty much news very frequently. And corruption among some of the officials, and corruption among some of the collusion between the elites and the institutionalized elite. And that is yet another level of corruption. If I look at a certain prince, let's call him Andrew, that did some very nefarious evil things to a minor in a certain island run by a certain guy that's no longer alive, well, that should land you in jail. If you and I do that anywhere in the world, well, maybe not anywhere in the world. If I happen to be of a certain royal family, I get away with that, even though I did it in broad daylight and everyone knows I did it. I still walk free like anyone else. So you have a level of, again, institutionalized corruption that is not considered corruption because it's not breaking any of your own laws, I guess, or at least not any of your cultural standards. When you have a monarchy elite, and it's not just the royal family of, it's when you have that elite level may be royal here, maybe that elite level is just super fucking rich in Switzerland or in Luxembourg or in the United States. People that are, the Epstein patrons, right? The Epstein Island connoisseurs, those guys are above the rest. And those guys, your Bills, Microsofts, and your folks like that, they work on another level. Now, it's not just those guys, it's people that associate and do business with those people, and that is corruption as well. The money that is not in the NHS, the money that is not in your public education system that has been siphoned away from your pocket to the pocket of these people, those are also levels of corruption that are obviously not taking into this ranking of 18 out of 180, all right? So, all of that taking into account, what does this tell me? That some countries are definitely more corrupt than others. Now, I also take into account that some countries have levels of corruption that don't even compute as corruption for this specific elite, the way they measure it, right? But this is something that does give me some valuable data. If I look at some of these places, yeah, probably Switzerland's going to be very nice and safe. And I can probably enjoy certain security in my finances, in some of my basic freedoms in a place like this. I would be very wary of thinking that UK ranks even close to the kind of safety they have in Switzerland on any level, or even the United States. So this is where the kind of stuff that I look into myself makes a big difference. And I'll give you one final good example of this. Global Peace Index. What country is more peaceful than the other? Well, bunch of different countries, bunch of different data taken into consideration. Iceland, New Zealand, Ireland, Denmark, Austria, wonderful countries. Portugal, super safe. Completely agree with that. And we go on down the list. Germany, we have over there. Norway, well, that's still ranking very nicely. Australia, Sweden, Spain, Italy. Okay, Italy, United Kingdom. All right. You have UK, you have Italy. Now, these are very close. These are pretty much the same. Well, bullshit, because if I look at stuff like this, if I look at the murder rate, homicide rate by 100, then I see a very different reality. I see that a country like Italy is actually one of the safest countries in the world. 0.5 homicides per 100K. 0.5. That is very close to Switzerland. So, man, that is really very close. I'm pretty much as likely to be murdered in either one of these. Now, Spain, kind of like the same thing. Austria, Ireland, good. I just keep scrolling down. And when I go to the United Kingdom, that's 1.1. That's double the homicide rate that you have in Italy. How come you say that these two are pretty much the same? Well, the reality is that what they took into account were things that have nothing to do with Global Peace Index. They take into account how much guns you have in the population. That lowers your Global Peace Index. How much money you spent in disarming the population improves your Global Peace Index. How much money you spent in defense. All of these things that really have not all that much to do with how safe a country is or not, especially the amount of guns in the population. I would assume that in a civilized society, guns make countries safer, which is the case of Switzerland, definitely so, and even the case of Italy, given how low a homicide rate it has, and yet they have handguns that you don't have in UK and so on. Anyway, you see where I'm going at. These are all things that have to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt, but there's things worth looking into. Yes, South America in general, quite corrupt. Yeah, Venezuela, 177 out of 180, absolutely. Uruguay, very nice place. Uruguay ranks very highly, right? And I would agree with that. Now, is that, end-all answer to everything? Of course not. Just more information to keep in mind. Folks, if you like what you saw here, leave a thumbs up. Always very much appreciated. Sharing the video, subscribing to the channel. How many of you have not subscribed already? That's always very helpful. And as I say always, you have my books available in the links there below. See you next one. Take care.